Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, about whom we've spoken many times on this show. Ilhan Omar, she's a Democrat member of Congress from Minnesota. She's a Somalian refugee. She is Muslim. She is one of the four, the squad, the term that President Trump has been using for the four freshman members of the U.S. Congress, all Democrat, all vitriolically, they have full of vitriol and hatred, attack on America over and over and over. And so Trump has been calling the squad. But Ilhan Omar is among the, I don't know how you even choose. She's a very, very difficult character, very critical of the country, very critical of America, very condescending toward America's culture, politics, people, the whole country. Ilhan Omar actually had a New York Times op-ed printed today. And the reason I want to talk about it is I want to tell you what she's saying and then what our response should be as a responsible people in America. Ilhan Omar published an essay, got an editorial published in the New York Times titled, "It is not enough to condemn Trump's racism." What she's talking about is that President Trump at a rally in Florida, I think it was, this was after the time his tweets, it was saying to the freshman four, the squad, you know, if you don't like it here, you can leave, or words to that effect. So people in this rally, some people that Trump did not lead the chant, but some people in the rally were chanting, "Send her back." So Ilhan Omar used that chant, which even President Trump said, no, I don't think they should have chanted that. You know, he didn't lead it, but that is what the people said. So Ilhan Omar's New York Times opinion piece is based on that incident in Florida. And she basically is saying she's again attacking all of America. She is just, she talks about, makes comparisons to demagogues throughout world history, use their own power, their state power, to target minority communities. She doesn't give Trump any credit for saying, yeah, I didn't think that was a good chant. You know, there's a lot of other chants he does that people do, he does like USA, but, you know, she doesn't give any credit for that. But she actually says, this is Ilhan Omar speaking last week as President Trump watched the crowd, blah, blah. The president's rally will be a defining moment in American history. She actually says there are grave stakes in the upcoming presidential election. This is not a fight about mere policy. It's a fight for the soul of our nation. And she talks about the ideals that are at the heart of our founding: equal protection under the law, pluralism, religious liberty are under attack. It's time for us all to stand up and defend them. She goes on and on. There's so many points to make out of what she had to say that are so outrageously hypocritical, outrageously dishonest, and again, so impossibly hateful of America. To start with, she calls for honoring religious liberty. This is the woman who's made so many anti-Semitic comments on the floor of the House in her speeches. She actually gave a speech at CARE. CARE, if you don't remember, CARE is Hamas in America. CARE, the organization people like to think is just kind of a Muslim American organization to help people understand each other, build a bridge, blah, blah. CARE is Hamas in America. She gave a speech there. She is repeatedly, relentlessly anti-Semitic. And there's a couple of things I wanted to mention about that when I say that she's anti-Semitic. You can disagree with a particular policy toward Israel, or you can disagree with a particular action by the Israeli government. You might think, well, I love Israel and I defend them, but I don't think they should have, you know, engaged in this diplomacy. I don't think they should have taken this action. You can disagree. Ilhan Omar hates the idea that Israel even exists, hates the Jewish people, hates the idea that Israel exists. And I want to explain a little bit about where that probably came from. We mentioned a few weeks ago about Ilhan Omar being the subject of an essay, a really great opinion piece, again, in the Wall Street Journal, and it was by Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Ayaan Hirsi Ali also grew up in Somalia, also was Muslim, also had the experience of leaving Somalia, and she described in this brilliant piece of the Wall Street Journal that basically when you grew up in Somalia as a Muslim, it is bred into the culture that Jewish people are terrible people, that Jews are horrible, that they should be killed, they should be hated. She, in this essay, went on and on. This is, again, in this essay, which you can find, by the way, at our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, under show, go down, list of links, you'll find this in there. This Wall Street Journal piece by Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She even describes the particular ways in which children growing up in Islam in Somalia are just just bred to hate Jewish people. She talked about herself and being embraced by that too. When her mother lost her temper, wanted to yell at somebody. Calling someone a Jew was like the worst thing you could call them, was the worst accusation, a hateful name you would fling at someone you were angry at. She talked about theology of Islam, taught from the beginning. Muhammad taught hatred of Jews. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, taught hatred of Jews, taught his followers, had in the Quran, hatred of Jews. She talks about they were talked about the Jews were occupying the Holy Land of Palestine. Jews have no right to live in the country of Israel. This is what children growing up in Somalia in Islam are taught. She also went on to the theological, the political stories woven together, pulled language out of the Quran and other places about how people are taught in Islam to hate Jews. One thing I didn't mention to you that I wanted to share that really relates to Ilhan Omar is Ilhan Omar's family fled Somalia and ended up in a refugee camp in Kenya. And this is part of what Ayaan Hirsi Ali explained in her Wall Street Journal piece. She said the refugee camps are a zone of indoctrination for hatred of Jews. She talked about that the people who are stuck in these refugee camps and they're struggling and they're poor and they're afraid and all that, that the refugee camps, like the one that Ilhan Omar was at, they are full of vulnerable people and Islamists. The term Islamist, those who believe they have the right to inflict Islam on people by force, and includes the Islamic mindset, the hatred of Jews, the hatred of Christians, the hatred of everyone except other Muslims. So Ayaan Hirsi Ali explains these kind of refugee camps where Ilhan Omar was. Refugee camps are full of vulnerable people. Islamists prey on them. The Islamists, the one trying to perpetuate hatred of Jews, they offer food, tents, first aid, education, and they've set up madrasas, Islamic schools, where the hatred of Jews is just taught to children. So understanding that Ilhan Omar, of all things, she is the one who is, she just led the fight on the floor of the House to support BDS, the effort within America, the mission within America to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel, to basically urge colleges, universities, peoples, organizations, everyone to do everything they can to destroy Israel. That's what the BDS movement is. Ilhan Omar supports this movement, and she's not even embarrassed to do that. She does it on the floor of the House. So here's Ilhan Omar lecturing America about accepting religious liberty. There are dozens of other things she said in this article. I can't get to them all because I want to get to my next point I want to make about her. But understand this is an ugly, dishonest, hideous thing that Ilhan Omar wrote. And the New York Times, of course, happily published. One other point I want to make about what Ilhan Omar wrote before I get to what is now happening with her is she actually wrote in this essay, this opinion piece, that she was giving examples of how hateful and evil America is. She attacked President Trump for his executive order trying to be sure that we thoroughly vet Islamic refugees before they come to this country. We've been over this many times on this show, the efforts that President Trump made, consistent with his campaign promises. He was going to try to protect American citizens from having refugees come here from countries where there is a serious problem with Islamic jihad. She just attacks the president on the idea of these executive orders relating to the refugee policy, never acknowledging that the reason President Trump would do this is because there is a huge problem internationally in this world with violent jihad committed by Islamists. She can't admit it. She acts like, as she writes this, as though it was this bizarre, no basis for it whatsoever. Why in the world would President Trump possibly say we ought to be careful about who comes here, possibly have a mission to have a little bit more vetting done before we bring people here in America who might mean us harm? She never even acknowledges the existence, the connection between the teachings of Islam and the jihadists. And to be very clear, Islam at its core, in the Quran, in the statements attributed to Muhammad, the founder, who is never to be questioned. He's the perfect man in Islam, never can disagree with him. This has been filled throughout this world, filled with teachings from the time of the founding of Islam by mullahs, imams, people in charge, people passing on Islam from one generation to the next. there has just been the perpetual teaching about the virtues, the goodness of jihad, the requirement that to be a devout Muslim, you must engage in jihad, you must kill or convert infidels, you must hate Jewish people, you must try to destroy the state of Israel. In fact, I want to mention another thing about this hatred of Jews before I finally get to what's really happening to Ilhan Omar today. But you know, there was a senior Hamas official, and again, Hamas is a terror organization whose entire purpose is to kill infidels, kill Jews, especially kill Jews. Hamas is just a is a terror organization. And CARE in America is Hamas in America. That is what CARE's founding is. But recently, and CARE always tries to deny that, in fact, Hamas, many people, including Ilhan Omar, will defend Hamas. But I want to just tell you something interesting, that people will claim that Hamas is really only violent toward Israel because Israel is occupying their land, that otherwise Hamas had no trouble at all with people of Jewish faith or of Jewish origin. Otherwise Hamas would be perfectly fine. The only reason they have any problem at all with the Jews in Israel is because the Hamas people claim that Palestinians and the Arabs really own that area of land. It's just a geographic dispute because the state of Israel is located in the land that they think should be theirs, and that really is the only problem they have. But I want to read you a statement again. This is a senior Hamas official urged Palestinians around the world to kill every Jew on the globe. This is a senior Hamas official urging Palestinians to kill every Jew on the globe. And in fact, the speech this is by Fathi Hamad, senior Hamas official. Our patience has run out. We're on the verge of exploding, blah, 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 not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, and if abroad. He says, a long time has passed. All of you 7 million Palestinians abroad, enough of the warming up. You have Jews everywhere. We must attack every Jew on the globe by way of slaughter and killing, if God permits. This is a recent statement, July 15th, by a senior Hamas official, Fathi Hamad. So this is the faith out of which Ilhan Omar is saying, hey, we have to have religious diversity, and she is in particular supportive of Hamas because she's willing to support CARE, which she knows perfectly well is Hamas in America. So now I want to turn what's happening to Ilhan Omar, which is this. Finally, in this country, we have someone brave enough to speak up. Judicial Watch, a wonderful organization. In fact, Tom Fitton, who's I think he's the founder, for sure the president. Tom Fitton, fabulous guy. I've happened to have met him a few times. He's a conservative it's a conservative watchdog group called Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch has now filed a complaint with the House of Representatives Ethics Office asking for an investigation into possible crimes committed by Minnesota Democrat Ilhan Omar. These crimes, and again, I'm going to tell you more about it. This is not a fly-by-night accusation, flung off at the last minute. I'm going to tell you where it's coming from. But Judicial Watch filed a complaint with the House of Representatives Ethics Office. Possible crimes committed by Ilhan Omar include perjury, immigration fraud, marriage fraud, state and federal tax fraud, and federal student loan fraud. And what he describes in his complaint is the evidence developed against Representative Omar was the result of a 3-year-long investigation in both the United States and in the United Kingdom by Mr. Steinberg, who's a prolific writer about this subject. Mr. Steinberg and his investigative reporter colleagues, Preya Sundar and Scott Johnson. It is supported by information gathered from public records, social media postings, genealogy databases, computer forensic analysis, unaltered digital photographs, discussions between investigative reporters and the subjects of the investigation. And the basic allegations are that this is, first of all, just to understand, this is really serious. This is Judicial Watch, a very nationally recognized, prominent organization calling on the House Ethics Committee, you got to investigate this lady for actual marriage fraud, apparently married her own brother, which was also at the same time an immigration fraud, giving him the basis to come here. And then she had also a marriage going on at the same time to another guy, state and federal tax fraud related to those marriages, federal student loan fraud. So Here's the story that they have. Document-based reporting by Steinberg has developed the following information. Representative Ilhan Abdullahi Omar, Ilhan Omar, a citizen of the U.S., married her biological brother, Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmnai, a citizen of the United Kingdom, in 2009, presumably as part of an immigration fraud scheme. They legally divorced in 2017. She gave birth to children fathered by another man, Ahmed Hirsi, both before and during her marriage to Elmi. Legal documents such as speeding tickets demonstrate she was living with Hirsi during the entirety of her marriage to Elmi. So she's married some other, or living with some guy, calling her husband, really married to her brother. She requested a default divorce, and on and on. But I raise this to say, these allegations are not just, she forgot to say Simon Says, she, got a speeding ticket, she didn't pay on time. These are serious allegations of real fraud, of dangerous fraud. And the reason this matters so much is this is a woman who is attempting to change America through her fortuitous election to the United States Congress and truly having duped the people of Minnesota who voted for her. I don't think they would have voted for her had they known this stuff. But part of what has come out, if you read, I've read so much about it today, I'm kind of filled with facts, got to decide which ones matter to try to tell you. But in Minnesota, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, which is a very leftist paper, has been ignoring the story. And there have been local writers, local bloggers saying, hey, you ought to look into this because here's this evidence, here's this piece of evidence. Star-Tribune just tries to keep it quiet, keep it low, don't want to be stirring things up. And part of the reason that they don't want to be stirring things up is because they don't want to be called Islamophobic. They don't want to be called haters. They don't want to step into that landmine if you dare to criticize anyone like Ilhan Omar. She is nasty. She is harsh. She is retaliatory. They don't want to deal with her. But there's been enough effort made by this David Steinberg, by some people, the writers at Powerline, and the Now Judicial Watch has gotten on board and saying, Congress Ethics Committee, you have to look up this stuff. You have to figure out if she even has the legal right to be here, because some of these instances may be actually deportable. But whether she is deported or not, she has taken advantage of America's generosity, taken advantage of her ability to silence people who question her, and she has gotten herself into Congress and into America and into her status as a legal citizen, apparently through a great deal of fraud. And it'll be so interesting to watch where the House Ethics Committee be willing to even investigate, because the last thing they want to do is set off the freshmen four who are for sure going to characterize all of these allegations as racist. This is what you'll hear from Ilhan Omar, and certainly from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, probably from Ayanna Pressley, and most certainly from Rashida Tlaib. All of them are going to call any inquiry, any questions, anything about Ilhan Omar will be characterized as racist. And I want to make a couple points about that. Number one, she is Muslim. She's forever playing the victim card. I'm the victim. This is just because of my religion. You don't respect my religious diversity. You're picking on me. Islam is not a race. Islam is not a race. And therefore, it's not racist for people to criticize or question someone. If she wants to say, I think you're doing this because I'm Muslim and because I embrace the Islamic faith, then that's a different discussion to have. We can have that discussion. Just because you embrace the Islamic faith doesn't put you above the law. The law is equally applied to everyone, as we heard yesterday over and over and over and over and over in the House Judiciary Committee hearing, I'm going to guess also in the House Intelligence Committee, where every time the Democrats finished pouncing on Trump and trying to get Mueller to say things he didn't even know what they were talking about. But the Democrats, most of them, ended their allotted 5 minutes with, and no one is above the law, and no one is above the law, which of course no one is. No one was saying anyone was above the law. But here they have Ilhan Omar, who's apparently committed very serious violations, and the Democrats they're not going to want to investigate them. So we need tremendous pressure on them to actually look into this, to not let them get away with dismissing all of this evidence and all the complaint and the underlying evidence with the, well, This sounds like a racist accusation. This sounds like Islamophobic. This sounds, we're not going to do this. These are very serious things. This is, were she a white old man in Congress, the House, I'm sure, would be very happy to investigate. One last thing related to Minnesota, and I got to say, it's a really interesting thing about Minnesota. Minnesota, has gone blue for a while. I have a personal deep fondness for Minnesota. I would tell you, my dad grew up there in Minnetonka, outside of Minneapolis. He had a big family. My mom grew up in Iowa, and big family, and a lot of them are in the Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin area. We spent all of our summer vacations growing up in Minnesota. It's a beautiful state. It's a beautiful place, and actually there are some really good salt of the earth people there. I think in Minnesota, we could have another discussion another day, but Minnesota, even though they've been voting Democrat and they've been voting, there is kind of a labor union history in Minnesota that gets them kind of tilting to the left, a little bit of the sympathy for the worker. And there was very much an effort by the socialist movement in this country when they came here and tried to grow socialist movement in America. Minneapolis was the headquarters of that. Minnesota was. And the pushing of the labor unions, which is, they go hand in hand, the socialism and the labor unions, they kind of work together. And they pushed this kind of ethos in the state of Minnesota that if you were loving and kind and caring, then of course you're going to be a Democrat. So they've gone Democrat for a while. But Ilhan Omar has caused so much consternation, so much concern. It is actually opening eyes in Minnesota. It's actually causing people to say, wait a minute, we love the idea of, helping the poor. We love the idea of helping low income. We love the idea of labor unions. But, we actually love America. We want to be Americans. And Ilhan Omar hates America. And she tells us this over and over and over and over. And I actually think Ilhan Omar might help President Trump win the state of Minnesota in the 2020 elections. Ilhan Omar is behaving terribly, never a grateful word about a country that took her in as a refugee, educated her, brought her family in. You don't hear a word of gratitude. All it is critical and in some way or another accusing America of being racist or Islamophobic or some other phobic. And just, she's a very radical socialist. Ilhan Omar, she's another whole element of Ilhan Omar. I have to go in another day, but there is the expression, the red-green axis, which we talked about before in this show, but there is a real blending in this country of the radical pro-Islamist, like Ilhan Omar, with the radical socialist Marxist left. The Marxists and the Islamists are very blended politically at this time, and she is a perfect example. Ilhan Omar, very left-wing, very Marxist. If you read her website, her congressional website, you realize she pretty much wants government control over pretty much everything, and big taxes paid in, and the government's job of redistributing them, creating all sorts of programs. This is not a woman who understands a thing about the notions of America and the idea of freedom and free markets. But last thing on Ilhan Omar before I turn to my next story, I just want to say that I think that there's a growing awareness, whether you did or did not find offense at President Trump's tweets that he said, time to go home, whatever his words were he used. The left instantly pounced on that to try to say, oh, see, another example, Trump's a racist, he's terrible, he's a racist. And there's a growing awareness that what he's talking about, and probably even why the crowd was chanting, but what he's talking about, and more people are starting to talk about, is the idea that Ilhan Omar and AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley, those four, the freshman four, the squad, their ideas are un-American. We have to stop pretending in this country that advocating for socialism belongs in America. We have to call it un-American. We have to be able not just to fling a label at it as un-American, but to describe how inconsistent socialism is with the fundamental founding ideas of America of liberty, how inconsistent socialism is with the promise of our founders of individual freedom. There has to be more of a willingness to say these ideas don't belong in America. And I said about Bernie Sanders, if you like Denmark so much and you want to go live in a Democrat socialist country, go live in Denmark, go live in and whatever country, you choose your country. Pick Cuba, pick Venezuela. Stop trying to change America. This is a really important thing, and I hope will be a theme that is spoken about more and more. It's okay to say the advocacy of especially this red-green axis, is Marxist, Islamist left in this country, which is, it isn't just like Ilhan Omar just happens to be a socialist and happens to be Islamist. Those ideologies have merged. They'll get divorced someday because they actually can't live together, but for now they are merged together. And it is a true force to be reckoned with, something to understand and reject and be able to articulately explain why it is so bad, why it cannot belong in America. And that, my friends, is my story about Ilhan Omar. We'll have to stay tuned whether the House Ethics Committee has the backbone to speak up.